In our Sustainability Perspective series, complementing the Sustainability Awards 2020 and Sustainable Packaging Summit, we're sharing interviews with thought leaders from across the packaging value chain. I'm delighted today to have Gerald Rebitzer from Amcor, who's going to be sharing his thought leadership and giving us some insights as to how Amcor approach the challenges of driving sustainability. Welcome, Gerald.
Yeah, hi. Thanks. Welcome to be here, Tim.
Thank you. So I'd like to start off by looking into the overall sustainability objectives that we face. How do we define sustainability when we think about this in packaged goods? In particular, there are lots of different approaches to circularity at the moment. A big focus on packaging waste, a big focus on driving a circular economy, and at the same time, a lot of controversy about what that really means. And also we have within the wider world, perhaps more than in the packaging debates in wider society, a rising awareness of the terrible dangers of climate crisis and the need to decarbonize our economy. And I wonder how we should think about how this impacts our chosen strategies in the circular economy.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think that's really a very valid question. I think, if we frame it, for me, the overarching goal is indeed sustainability. And if we think about sustainability, and I can say I have been working in sustainability for 25 years now, all my professional career after studying environmental engineering. Actually, if you think about sustainability, let's say the term is a few hundred years old. It was actually invented several hundred years ago in Germany, in forest management, where basically people, at that time they relied on forest for energy, for heating, etc., for cooking, for building, for all kinds of applications. And then they realized, if we continue like that, we cut down the forest because all of Europe, for instance, was a forest essentially. Most of Europe was one big forest. And then they realized, if we continue like that, at one point we don't have a forest anymore with additional problems, but basically then we are killing the source we are living on. And then the whole idea of sustainable development was created to say, okay, you only take as much wood out of the forest that you are replanting again, so that you really have a stable ecosystem, which basically, sustainability is having a plan that works in the long term. And in the end, that hasn't changed. Obviously, there has been a big focus on circular economy and packaging recently, but it's also not that new. The circular economy and waste management law in Germany was, I believe, created in 91 or maybe even 90 or 92. That was a hot topic when I was studying environmental engineering. So that concept is around for a long time. And for me, the goal is sustainability, to really, it's a whole area of minimizing environmental impact and balancing that with the needs of humans and the economy, but in a way that can go on for a long time, or ideally kind of, for forever. And then circularity, I know there are some people who view this a little bit different. It's not overarching to sustainability. Circularity is a tool to get there. So in the end, you want something to make circular because you use less resources, you have less impacts if we talk about climate change, and then circularity makes sense. So it's not circularity for the sake of circularity. And in that sense, because if I take maybe a bit provocative example, but I grew up in Germany, in West Germany, but I also know at that time even East Germany before the wall came down quite well. And that was a very circular economy in some sense, because they needed to reuse and recycle literally everything, but it was completely inefficient. So it was kind of, they didn't really have a choice because they didn't have the funds to buy a lot of materials or import a lot of materials. But, that's not the circularity, obviously, we are looking for, because it also came with a lot of environmental pollution and just inefficiency. So in the end, it's about getting to a point where then circularity serves sustainability, actually, reduces environmental impact, and ideally creates jobs and, aligns also with the social goals of society. So if we take that, I would say overall, that's what we need, where we need to go. And when we talk about packaging today, that means that you want to actually, and also focusing maybe mainly on the environmental part, that we want to have packaging or packaged product system that overall, because it's not only the package, it's the package and the product together, that overall, delivers the food, the medication, whatever, at the lowest environmental impact. And then the second part is, with all the waste issues, which, are undeniable there, and where we have to say that littering and, seeing plastic or other packaging materials in the environment is simply unacceptable. So we need to make sure we contain this and also collect and recycle those materials so they are coming back, and that this is done in a way that also further reduces environmental impact. So it's really about looking at the holistic system, the product packaging system, how it's used, plus making sure that we don't have waste ending up in the environment, and that this material can be reused. And if that's done in a smart way, then overall you actually reduce environmental impact quite significantly.
Yes, thank you. And I suppose we can observe, can't we, that over the years, as this has impacted on packaging and packaged goods, there's sometimes been a tension between the packaging waste side and the resource efficiency side. Obviously, over a period of time, there was a great emphasis on material reduction and down gauging, and we found that those complex materials were largely fueling, packaging waste going into landfill and leaking into the environment. Clearly now the target has changed, and we're much more conscious of the waste side, and sort of restated that circular economy agenda. How do you see now the project developing in trying to resolve that tension between circularity and resource efficiency?
Yeah, I think that's actually the key, and maybe even before going there, an example, I think a very illustrative, a very powerful example, if we think about automobiles, if we think about cars, if you compare a modern car or you take an electric car, actually I have an electric car which is made out of a lot of plastics. It doesn't have much metals in there. And you could say from a recycling circularity point of view, it's actually a real challenge, and obviously it is. And if you compare that to an old gasoline car, then that is, from a recycling, a circularity point of view, actually much better, because it's if you go back a few decades, it's one big piece of steel which is perfect for recycling, while the other, has some challenges. While overall, it's quite clear. Yeah, if we take that example of an electric car, at least if you also get the electricity from renewable energy, over the lifetime, it's much better than an old gasoline car. So I think that's the same, and everybody would actually, most people would even agree to that very literally. In packaging, obviously, people don't see the life cycle performance, but they see the waste at the end. Everybody sees that as a consumer you are discarding that. So that's, I think, what we need to do is to absolutely keep that efficiency. So work on the circularity and really make this happen while keeping the efficiency and the overall environmental benefits of minimized materials. Because it's obviously a bit too much generalized, but if one would look at one parameter, I've done a lot of work in life cycle assessment. We do that really as business as usual for all developments at Amcor. We do over 800 LCAs a year. But if you take one simple parameter, it's less about the material. It's mostly about how much material you need to pack a product. So if you just have one parameter, obviously if you change between different materials, that also changes. But the driving factor is kind of the material efficiency. And in that sense, it's absolutely critical to keep this and make it circular. And obviously it's not a solution to make things, to upgauge things, let's say, in order to meet, for instance, recyclability criteria, because sometimes you have say up to 10% or 5% of non-target material in the, you have a polyethylene, for instance, and then you can have something that has up to 5% of 10% or so non-polyethylene material. The solution cannot be there to keep that and make the polyethylene thicker to meet the formal requirements. So I think it's about keeping that efficiency and enabling recyclability with smart. So it's really bringing those two things together, and I think that's the key for success.
Great, yeah, and obviously, just as the task for a modern electric vehicle now, which is essentially downgauged compared to a 1960s power car, is to try to ensure that all of the elements of that vehicle are as recyclable as possible. Similarly, in packaging, we want to ensure that we are able to create substrates that are recyclable and functional, as you've been alluding to. In terms of plastic packaging and flexibles, the kinds of design for recyclability guidelines that have been developed by organizations such as CFlex are emphasizing using monomaterials to reduce the complexity, make it much easier to incorporate into existing recycling. Could you comment on where that leads innovation in packaging and in research and development generically, and also in terms of how that's playing out in Amcor?
Yeah, I think what it really does is setting a frame for the development and say, within these boundaries. So obviously, traditionally you always had base requirements in terms of functionality. The product has to work. The product, you need to be able to produce the product. It has to work at the at the customer, at the filling lines. The logistics system needs to work. So that's kind of the technical requirements. Obviously, it has to be economic, that it's affordable. It lines up with the overall value proposition of the product. And then you have food safety, quality requirements, obviously. And I think now for a few years now, the element of really sustainability in the sense of recyclability, reusability, or having a viable end of life option is added on as a key requirement. And what we have done in Amcor, when we came out with our pledge in beginning of 2018, or even before we started with that, obviously, to say, this is the brief for is kind of the specifications. These are the requirements for those materials, and any packaging we bring on the market needs to be designed to be recyclable, which meaning fitting a recycling stream, which means for flexible packaging, where I'm talking about now, either it has to fit the aluminum recycling stream, so it's really an aluminum-based packaging. It needs to fit the paper-based stream, or it needs to fit the plastic-based stream. And C-Flex is now focusing has been focusing on the plastic-based stream, where it's about focusing on polyolefins, polyethylene, polypropylene, and maximizing those materials and minimizing other materials. And I think that even drives innovation, because you have to find, let's say, smarter solutions to get rid of multi-materials while still achieving the same functionality and the same efficiency. And what I should probably also say, what at least in Amcor we do, in the beginning I was talking about sustainability overall. It's really about the sustainability of the complete life cycle. So for around 15 years we have been using life cycle assessment, and like I said, we do that for all product developments. So the goal is that the product or the new packaging has a viable end of life option, recycling, reuse, or others, and also is optimized from a life cycle perspective. So we don't want to go the other way when you, let's say, upgauge, or you find maybe a seemingly working solution. Obviously that we want to avoid. And I have to say, contrary to some actors in the industry, it's indeed possible. And if we look from a carbon footprint point of view, if we focus on polyolefins, these are also the the plastics with the lowest environmental impact. And if you replace PET in flexible packaging as a layer, if you replace other more technical plastic materials, actually you also achieve a benefit in carbon footprint just from the so-called cradle to gate of the material. So for the kind of whole production chain of the material. So I think we see a lot of win-win situation where we make the product more circular, and we also reduce the total life cycle impact, like carbon footprint.
Thank you. And can we home in on the more technological specifics of how Amcor has been approaching this task? So I know that over certainly the last 2 years since the pledge, and I'm sure that process began earlier, you've been really looking at your whole range of flexible products, and looking at how to re-engineer all of them to meet these design for recyclability guidelines. And I believe it was about 2 years ago that the first breakthrough innovation was launched, which was a Ciox coated polyolefin. Can you tell us a bit about that journey and how that is now spreading into more challenging applications?
Yeah, I think that's, again, I think, it's looking at what are the for higher barrier applications, often like a classical material could be something like a PET, aluminum foil, PE structure, maybe with some even additional layers. And, if we take on that brief, obviously this M-Light Ciox technology, which we have in-house, was a prime kind of platform for this, because we knew before that you can achieve barrier properties similar to aluminum, and with a material that is that is in the nanometer quantity, that where I always say, if you have something like Ciox, or people sometimes also describe it as a nano glass layer, the recycler doesn't really know it's there. So from that perspective, we already had a platform and a technology that enables that functionality, those barrier materials, the machinability, etc. But is then also very kind of neutral in terms of of recyclability, because it's obviously only with a polyolefin alone you cannot achieve the required barrier requirements, because then we get back to your question, are we jeopardizing efficiency? And we did a very kind of back of the envelope calculation. If we would look at something like because there are some people saying, okay, if it's monomaterial, why don't we make everything out of polyethylene in a very simple way, just simple polyethylene without any barrier materials? And if you take a coffee pack, for instance, to get the same shelf life barrier requirements than for an existing high barrier pack, which is about 1/10 of a millimeter thick, 100 micron or so. If you made this out of polyethylene only, then you would need a wall thickness of 35 centimeters. So you basically need 35 centimeters of material to replace 0.1 millimeter of material. So, obviously it's a kind of a crazy example, because it would not be practical, and you would waste material in an incredible way. But there, the point is, combining materials in a smart way that actually then deliver the functionality, that sometimes can even bring additional benefits. The Ciox material also has the benefit that you can actually have transparent packaging, what is very useful for some product where the consumer should be able to see the product, which is not possible with aluminum foil, for instance. So I think it's really bringing this together, and then it's step by step developing that technology further. And obviously, just this week we launched a retort pouch, also based on this M-Light Ciox technology, like a polypropylene pouch, which is indeed a monopolypropylene pouch, fulfilling the C-Flex design criteria, and then also fulfilling the functionality and the challenges around the heat resistance in the filling of the product, where the food is cooked in the pouch. And I think that shows you need to work on it step by step. You need to work on it with the right, let's say, human power and investments behind, and then you get there. And I think this retort pouch, polypropylene retort pouch, is indeed a breakthrough, because honestly, this is something, when we made our pledge, I had a lot of people asking me, even within C-Flex, peers or customers, saying, yeah, we know you have a lot of business in that retort packaging business, and now you made that pledge, but we don't think it will ever be possible to bring that functionality into monopolyolefin structures. And now it's we can show that it's done, and it's on the shelf actually this month in a product from Nestle in the Netherlands. So I think obviously it's not something you develop overnight, but in Amcor overall we have around 1,000 people working in R&D, and they all have the brief in whatever format and materials they work on to make sure it's aligned with design guidelines. And when you put that power behind it, then you also come up with the solutions and advance the whole subject.
Yes, I recall when the original Ciox-based Amlite platform was launched a couple of years ago, that it was widely considered a real breakthrough, and bringing monomaterial recyclable solutions to some quite high barrier applications. And at the time, it was the next big step that was anticipated was extending that to retort applications. So it must be a lot of satisfaction to have reached that next level within your organization. So that's been a great overview of the technological journey and the innovations that have been required. I'd like to maybe finish this interview by taking another step back and thinking about the other pieces in this jigsaw that need to come together. Obviously, there are things that Amcor can do unilaterally in terms of leveraging their R&D capabilities, but to really build a circular economy with coherent products which are also resource efficient, we need all of the other stakeholders to come together and to ensure that the whole system and societal buy-in is there. We've mentioned C-Flex a few times, and in case any of our viewers are unfamiliar with it, that's a consortium of the whole value chain across the European flexible packaging value chain, looking to drive the roadmap for a coherent circular economy in flexibles. You're very, very active in that personally, Gerald, I know, and you've been involved not just in the technical discussions, but have a good view of all of the links in the chain that need to come together, from regulation to specifications at brand owner, retailer level that enable these little compromises to happen to ensure everything works, and to ensure that there's a viable economy, a market for recycled materials in the end. Could you end by giving us a comment on how that journey is coming together? And obviously it's come a long way with the agreement of design guidelines for recyclability. What are the remaining big challenges and bottlenecks that you see in completing that picture?
Yeah, indeed. I think we talked a lot about packaging design, and that's a foundation. If you don't have that in place, you will never get there. I don't know if think back to mathematics lessons. It's kind of the necessary condition. It's not sufficient. And then with C-Flex, we have aligned on those guidelines. I think the value of that is that it's really, like you said, cross value chain. That we really have the raw material producers, packaging companies, brand owners, and the waste management recycling sector, and other organizations like packaging recovery organization who organize the whole recycling and circular economy schemes in the different countries. And the other point is that it's and I would really want to stress that that CFlex is not an industry association. So it's really about the people who want to make a change. We have a clear roadmap that includes the design pieces, and then the next thing is about how do we align with the recycling sector, with the packaging recovery organization, with the legislator on the whole piece of collection and sorting infrastructure. Because if that's not in place, then it will never be recycled. So we need to, first step is design, the second step is really the whole collection and recycling infrastructure. And together with that, it's also the end market. So we are also kind of mapping the whole flows. Where are these materials? What are the types of materials that are on the market in Europe, and where could they go? Because at least shorter term, there are limited options to feed them back into the same materials again, even for regulatory restrictions. Today you cannot really use post-consumer recycled plastics in most food contact applications. But I think it's really this picture. It's a design, it's the infrastructure piece to put that in place. And now we have a lot of the industry who really supports this, even the parts of the industry who have to pay through that through EPR, and then the end market, because obviously the recyclers will also only invest if there are viable end markets for these materials, whether they be in packaging, in building, or automotive applications. And I think this kind of picture, and then you have the circular economy. The circular economy is not about one pack going back, it's about the material flows in the circular economy, that we minimize the use of virgin material, we minimize the environmental impact, and then and that's more from a total systems perspective and not from a one item perspective. So obviously these things are critical, and the key parts are really value chain cooperation and coalition of the willing. And it's not about finding the common denominator, the lowest common denominator, which can happen in some industry association, but it's really coming up with solutions also, not going to the regulators and telling them what does not work, but coming up with proactive solutions. And I think here, again, from the design, from the infrastructure, also from the recycling technology and end market, CFlex is heavily working on that. Obviously, it can always go faster. I think that's, we and many others are pushing for that, but obviously that change also, takes some time. But I think we are on a good track to work also towards the 2025 goals.
Thanks, Gerald. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. We'll be hearing a lot more from Amcor and other sustainability pioneers and thought leaders over the coming weeks in our season of, unfortunately, virtual Sustainable Packaging Summit panels and workshops. If you would like to follow those and join in, please subscribe to Packaging Europe or follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter if you'd like to stay in the loop. Thanks so much, Gerald Rebitzer, for joining me today.
Thanks, Tim. It was a pleasure. Bye.
And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Goodbye.